Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today as we continue our series upon his shoulders. We're looking at this prophecy in Isaiah 9, where Isaiah is speaking 700 years before Jesus is born, but he says a child will be given to us, a son will be born, and the government will be upon his shoulders. As we enter into this season that we're in life and the world, where we've got political instability, economic uncertainty, we're not quite too sure how the coming months are going to play out, we're reminding ourselves that actually the government is upon his shoulders. Last time Johnny ended with this invitation that Jesus has in Matthew 11, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." So in this series, we've been thinking about as a bit of a lighthouse message, something to guide us through and keep us safe this year. We've been reminding ourselves that the government's upon his shoulders, that we can bring our burdens to him as he invites us to him. And I want to just take that a little bit further today, thinking about maybe some of the burdens, or maybe thinking about what is on our shoulders. So there's 4 things that I'm going to talk through today, and at the end of each one I'm going to give you some time to think about what that means for you. So you might want to grab a pen and paper or get a note up on your device. But before we jump in and start doing some heavy lifting, let's warm up those shoulders with me. Okay, you ready for a bit of a shoulder warm up? So if it hurts, if it pops, if it's broken, don't do it. But if it's not that, just go gently with me. Just, roll your shoulders backwards. How does that feel? Oh, good. Can you roll them forwards again as well? Maybe they're creaking, maybe they're clunking, maybe they've popped out. I hope not. Maybe they're a bit stiff. Maybe just reach your elbow across and get a bit of a stretch in there. Is that feeling good? Maybe reach in the other way. Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay, and then bring your shoulders all the way up to your ears. And then, let it go. Hope you're feeling relaxed. One more time, bring them up to your ears. And let them go. Okay, are you ready to do some work today? So, 4 things that we're going to think through. Number 1, my weak shoulders. Number 2, a cabinet reshuffle. Number 3, an absent levelling up agenda. And number 4, the Isaiah 9 prophecy. So, number 1, my weak shoulders. I spent 2020 doing a lot of stretches on my shoulders and my back. I think going straight into working from home with a different rhythm, sitting on a dining room chair and not the nice comfy office chairs that we have here at Renewal, having to dash out and buy 50 jars of jam for helping hands, and all the stress and tension that came with that season did not do my back many favours. So by May, I found myself in the osteopath's office with Jeremy, and they get you doing all the stretches, and then they put you in a funny position and they jump on top of you and your back cracks, and it's lovely. I absolutely love it. And Jeremy sorted my back out for me, which was good, because in the August we were going camping, and driving and setting up a tent and sleeping on an airbed is not kind for your back. And I said to Jeremy, am I going to be okay camping? And he was like, keep doing the stretches, keep working the back, Justyn, you'll be fine. Well, he was right and he was wrong, because my back was perfectly fine, but my shoulders were agony. I hardly slept the whole 2 weeks because my shoulders were just hurting so much all day long, all night long. I was in the tent doing all the shoulder exercises, trying to get some relief. I got back from holiday and I went to see him, and he said, "How was it?" I said, "Well, Jeremy, the back's great, but the shoulders, what have you done there in agony?" And he had a little look and a little prod and a little crack, and he said, "Well, it's nothing I've done. Have you been carrying a backpack on your back, or have you been having something heavy on your back? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. But then I remembered, on our way to going camping, we went to London for the day. And we crammed in a whole day of sightseeing and wandering around, and it was too much for our kids to cope with, so I spent the whole day with one of them on my shoulders, carrying them round. I told this to Jeremy. I was like, I know what I've done. And he looked at me and just said, Justyn, your shoulders are not strong enough to carry them anymore. You have weak shoulders. I wonder what God might be saying to you. Just have a little think for a moment about my weak shoulders and that bombshell from Jeremy that you can't carry them anymore. And maybe just hit pause and just see if God's saying something to you. Okay, I hope you found something from my weak shoulders. Let's think about a cabinet reshuffle. This is not a prediction about what's going to happen in the UK government this year, although I'm not sure you have to be a prophet to know there'll be a few comings and goings, I'm sure. In Isaiah 22, there's a little cabinet reshuffle that God orchestrates. Let me read it to you. Verse 15, thus says the Lord God of hosts, come and go to this steward, to Shebna, who is over the household, and say to him, what have you to do here? And whom have you here, that you have cut out a tomb for yourself, you who cut out a tomb on the heights and carve a dwelling for yourself in the rock? Behold, the Lord will hurl you away violently, O you strong man. He will seize firm hold on you and whirl you around and throw you like a ball into a wide land. There you shall die, and there shall be your glorious chariots, your shame of your master's house. I will thrust you from your office, and you will be pulled down from your station. In that day, I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your robe, and will bind your sash on him, and will commit your authority to his hand. And he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open and none shall shut. He shall shut and none shall open. So there's this guy called Shebna who appears to be kind of the chief of staff in the king's household, or he's over the running of the king's palace. So he's got a significant leadership responsibility. There's a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. But God turns up and he appears to be unhappy with Shebna. And there's a few things that he compares Shebna with Eliakim. It's a bit of speculation, but we wonder maybe Shebna isn't Jewish. Maybe he's not from God's people. God says, what have you to do here? You're somewhere that you don't belong. It wouldn't be uncommon if you're trying to keep all the nations around you happy to have people from those nations, from those royal households kind of in your leadership team. You know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So it might have been put there as a bit of a diplomatic move. But God turns up and says, Shebna, you're somewhere I didn't put you. You're carrying responsibility that I didn't give you. What are you doing here? And yet of Eliakim, he says, I will call you. Shebna's somewhere he doesn't belong, but Eliakim is somewhere that God is putting him. You know, if there is responsibility on your shoulders, make sure it's God who put it there. And it's not somewhere that you have got yourself. Shebna uses his power to build his own legacy. God says you've carved yourself a tomb. You're a mighty man. You're building your own little empire here. But for Eliakim, he says he's going to father the people in Jerusalem. Shebna is using the responsibility and the authority he's got to build up his own name Eliakim will use it to build up the people. If you do have responsibility on your shoulders, it's not to serve yourself. It's so that you can use it to serve others. God calls Shebna a mighty man. It's a little bit ironic when Isaiah is saying it. Oh, you mighty man, what are you doing here? Shebna builds himself up. But Eliakim is called a humble servant. And God says, Eliakim, this is the kind of person that I can put responsibility on. I will put the key on his shoulders because I've called him. He'll serve the people. He is humble. And so the responsibility is on him. It's a bit of a picture of Jesus who is to come. In Revelation 7:3, John says, write this letter to the angel of the church in Philadelphia. This is the message from the one who is holy and true, who has the key of David. What he opens, no one can close. And what he closes, no one can open. So Shebna has taken responsibility for himself. He's using it to build himself up. Eliakim is a humble servant who's called by God to father the people, and he then has the spiritual authority to open things and to shut things. It's a picture of Jesus to come, but in this little cabinet reshuffle that goes on, I wonder if God's saying something to you. Do you find yourself in places or with opinions or judgments or responsibilities, and God would say, what are you doing here? I haven't made you responsible for this. I haven't put that on your shoulders. If you do have responsibility and weight on your shoulders that God has given you, maybe for your family, maybe for your group, your team, your workplace, your whatever God's put on you to carry, how are you using that responsibility? You might want to hit pause again and just collect your thoughts and see what God might be saying to you. Okay, so we've thought about my weak shoulders. We've thought about this cabinet reshuffle. God is unhappy with how Shebna is carrying responsibility, so he replaces him with Eliakim. Let's look at an absent levelling up agenda. This is the government's levelling up agenda, isn't it? We know there's a bit of a gap between the south and the north. I don't know if there's any southerners watching this, but we're filming this up in Solihull. Don't worry, we do have gas masks for you if you come, so that you can have the fresh air. We don't want you getting a nosebleed if you go too north. Now I've insulted the southerners. Do we have any northerners watching? It's grim up north, isn't it? Grim and cold. Thank you for joining me anyway. But we know in England there's this disparity often between the south and the north. It's the same in Israel. In Isaiah 9, the prophecy is this: the land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. So as Isaiah is prophesying in Israel, in the south you have Jerusalem and the temple, and it's the hub of religious and political activity. It's the hub of kind of the high society. It's the kind of religious bastion of Israel, and they really think they're something. Up in the north then, they're closer to the Gentile nations, the non-Jewish nations around them. And not only that, they've got traders from other nations constantly passing through. And they tend to be more rural, more farming, more fishing, more impoverished communities. And so you've got this much more diverse population, this kind of much more poor population. This population that's not kind of as purely Jewish as the religious south is, but is intermixed with the Gentile nations. And of course, when the nations invade Israel, they come from the north and they attack the north first. So in the history of Israel, there's this kind of divide between south and north. You see it even in the Gospels. In John 1, Philip goes to his friend Nathanael and says, "We found the one we've been waiting for, Jesus of Nazareth." And Nathanael goes, Nazareth? It's grim up north. And anything good come from Nazareth? You know, he just thinks that nothing good can come from the north. In John 7, the people start proclaiming that Jesus is the one God has sent, but others go, no, hang on, he's from Galilee. God wouldn't send someone from up north. It's grim. It's mixed with Gentiles. It's impoverished. It's not this religious, posh, pure south. There's this north-south divide. And yet, where does Isaiah say the light will dawn? Where does he say the people sat in darkness will see a great light? He says it's in Galilee of the Gentiles. It's not dawning first on this lot down in the south, although it is for them as well, but the light is breaking first on those who are looked down on, those who are impoverished, those who don't think of themselves and aren't thought of as being particularly good, spiritual and religious, those who are a bit neglected, those who are thought less of. That's who the light first shines on. I wonder what God might be saying to you. We've got my weak shoulders, we've got this cabinet reshuffle, we've got this levelling up kind of absent agenda, this north-south divide, and yet God first dawns up in the north. What might God be saying? Again, maybe just hit pause and collect your thoughts. Okay, so we're coming to upon his shoulders. Let's look at the Isaiah 9 prophecy. Verse 2-6, the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. You will enlarge the nation of Israel, and its people will rejoice. They will rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, and like warriors dividing the plunder. For you will break the yoke of their slavery and lift the heavy burden from their shoulders. You will break the oppressor's rod, just as you did when you destroyed the army of Midian. The boots of the warrior and the uniforms blood-stained by war will all be burned. There will be fuel for the fire, for a child is born to us. A son is given to us. The government will rest upon his shoulders. Just for this message as part of this series, I just want us to reflect on one thing from this prophecy in Isaiah. Before Isaiah tells us that the government will be upon his shoulders, he tells us that God has to take things off our shoulders. If it is upon him and not on us, then there's three things that God says he will break. He'll break the yoke of slavery, he'll lift the heavy burden, and he will break the oppressor's rod. So what's on your shoulders? Maybe there's a yoke. The yoke was a farming device that was put round animals so that they could pull the plough, but it would restrict their ability to move. It would make them serve somebody else. They would be doing somebody else's work by pulling the plough. It was a heavy yoke that was upon them, and then they had no choice as to where they could go. They would have to plough the field. It almost reminds us of Israel in Egypt under the yoke of oppression as slaves there. It's something that enslaves you and limits you and makes you serve something else. Is there a yoke upon you that's restricting you? Because God says, I've got to break that off. Then he says, I need to lift the heavy burden. Maybe you're carrying a burden for somebody or for something. Maybe you're heartbroken about something. Maybe there's something that weighs heavy on you. And it's a real thing. It's an important thing. It doesn't need breaking, it needs carrying. But God says, I'm going to lift that burden from you. That's not yours to carry. The things that enslave you need breaking. The things that are breaking your heart need lifting. And then he says, I'll break the oppressor's rod. And the oppressor's rod was used to beat and to drive you, to be beaten over the back and the shoulders, to make you go harder, to make you go faster. What's driving you? What's beating you up? What's demanding more and more and more? Again, it's echoing the slavery journey in Egypt, and God says, I'm going to break that. Before we can say the government is upon his shoulders, we need things that are enslaving us to be broken off ours. We need the burdens that we're carrying to be lifted and given to him. And the things that would drive us and beat us need snapping in half. So we come to Matthew 11, 28, 30. Then Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. So we've thought about my weak shoulders. We've thought about this cabinet reshuffle. We've thought about this levelling up agenda where actually God seems to come first to those who are most downtrodden. And then we've thought about this Isaiah 9 prophecy where actually before the government's on his shoulders, he takes things off ours. I wonder, as you've been thinking and maybe writing some of those thoughts down, what your conclusion is from these four elements. What do you think God is saying to you? Here's my conclusion. We need to humble ourselves. We need to admit that our shoulders aren't strong enough. There's many things in our life that we actually just can't carry on our shoulders anymore. We need to ask God, yes, the government's upon your shoulders, but would you break things off mine? Would you lift burdens that are weighing me down? And would you give me your rest so I'm not constantly beaten and driven, but I can rest in you? And if I do have responsibility that God, you have put on my shoulders, help me to be like you, Jesus, to use it to serve others. Maybe we need a reshuffle in our hearts and lives to humble ourselves and say, Jesus, anything that is heavy is for you to have, and anything that you give us is easy and light, because we have weak shoulders. So God, would you take it off us, and would the government be upon your shoulders?
Thank you for joining us for our message. If there was something that resonated with you, or you want to explore a little bit more about Jesus, then go to renewalcc.com/next steps. You can fill out the form there and we can connect with you. Also, if you have a question for the team or you just want to say hello, then you can get in contact with us at hello@renewalcc.com and one of the team will be in touch with you. Also, we want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also go to renewalcc.com/media where you can find our Spotify and Apple podcast channels, where you can find all our messages and all our online content, and there's a new episode being released every Monday. Finally, if you like the work that we do, you can also donate to Renewal. If you go to renewalcc.com/give, you can find all the ways in which you can give into the life of Renewal. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.